Hello and welcome to episode 73 of the HamCorp training manual. In this episode, we will construct a Naquadah processing area and set up the neutron activators to process our Naquadah oxide mixture dust into Naquadah. Let's start off with some building. Today I'm gonna set up Naquadah processing. I have already set up a Lapitronic supercapacitor with a Tesla cover, and now let's go over the flowchart. This is a pretty long, kind of convoluted process because there are a lot of partial loops. And what I mean by partial is you don't get a full refund of some materials. So for example here, the fluorine, don't mind the numbers exactly, but just notice that I do have to put in a little bit of fluorine even though I get a lot of it back. And this is pretty long, and we're going to go through it in stages. So I've divided this into sections. Each section deals with going from one Naquadah product to the next. So each of these is kind of an intermediate step. At the end it gets a little weird because it's hard to say what the main Naquadah processing line is because there's a couple different things. And also some things get looped back. Whatever, we'll get to that. So the first neutron activator happens here after the Naquadah adamantium solution. So I think let's deal with these first three sections first. So section 1 is one stack of Naquadah oxide mixture dust getting turned into 64,000 liters of low quality Naquadah emulsion. There are some loops here, as you can see. The antimony we get back, the fluorine we partially get back, but I'm just going to set up everything in section 1. All the numbers here have been scaled to process one stack of Naquadah oxide mixture dust. Just arbitrary choice, doesn't really matter. I decided one stack because it's a nice number. And the way this works is the Naquadah oxide mixture dust gets combined with fluoroantimonic acid in an EBF, and you get titanium trifluoride and some low quality Naquadah emulsion. That is basically the first step. But processing the titanium trifluoride dust is what's covered here as part of this EBF. We get titanium. We also get some hydrofluoric acid, and that is used in making fluoroantimonic acid, which is hydrofluoric acid plus antimony pentafluoride. Antimony pentafluoride we get from antimony pentachloride and hydrofluoric acid, and the pentachloride we get from distilling antimony pentachloride solution, which we get from an LCR. Very long 4-5 step process to make fluoroantimonic acid, but luckily that is exactly what's covered in these quests. So starting at Ether Strike, you can just follow these quests all the way up to King of Acid, and that is fluoroantimonic acid, which, by the way, fun fact, in real life is the strongest acid that we use, and I think know of, so don't drink that. This ether gets completely recycled, so you don't need to make more than what you need. I've scaled everything to a stack of Naquadah oxide mixture dust, so I'm just going to make whatever that amount is. And I'll see you when I have the first step done. And we're back. This is the entirety of stage 1 of Naquadah processing, complete with a full input hatch worth of low quality Naquadah emulsion. Let me grab one of these to finish the quest. Now let me try and explain what's happening here, because I've done a few things a little bit differently. We start off with a chem reactor that combines ether, chlorine, and antimony dust. This makes antimony trichloride solution. That is combined with chlorine here in an LCR to make antimony pentachloride solution. Let me just quickly say though that here I have a shared input hatch full of chlorine. That is because in my flowchart, I have 480,000 chlorine that's split into 2 different LCRs. And this is effectively the same thing because these are the 2 LCRs that the chlorine goes to. And if I'm just sharing the input hatch, I don't have to worry about splitting ratios or anything like that. Antimony pentachloride solution goes into this Dangote distillus. I guess it could have been a regular distillation tower, but Dangote's faster. Dangote uses less energy. Why not? So that makes antimony pentachloride. It also gives you some ether back, which I am recycling. This goes straight back to the starting point. Now the antimony pentachloride gets combined with hydrofluoric acid, and that makes antimony pentafluoride, as well as hydrochloric acid. That happens in this LCR. The hydrochloric acid, I just immediately recycle back into hydrogen and chlorine. The chlorine gets sent back there, like I mentioned before. And the hydrogen goes into this LCR, which makes hydrofluoric acid from fluorine and hydrogen. Now on the flowchart, I've tried to make a note of the fact that you don't get all of the fluorine back when you do the full Naquadah line. So what I've tried to do here is a little weird, and I've never done anything like this before, and I hope it works. So basically I have one fluid hatch for the recycled part, and I have another fluid hatch for the additional input that needs to go in for every cycle. So I get 426,000 liters of fluorine back, and that goes into this LUV input hatch, and I have a fluid detector cover here. I did 416,000 because that plus the capacity of this HV input hatch is 480. So I don't know why I did that, honestly. It's just kind of intuition, and I feel like it's going to work, but I don't know for sure. And this fluid detector cover makes sure that we only pump out additional fluorine if this input hatch is less than 416,000 liters. I've done this to prevent kind of a clogging of our system. If I had a single input hatch and I was pumping into it, eventually later down the line when we get the fluorine back, it would back up into that output hatch wherever it goes, and it would not have a place to go. And so everything would stall, assuming I have enough fluorine, which I really don't. I'm hoping this will guarantee that there's always enough space for the recycled part, but we'll see. Anyway, at this point we have antimony pentafluoride. That gets combined again with hydrofluoric acid, but this hydrofluoric acid is in a clean 100% recycle loop, so it's completely separate from this hydrofluoric acid. This goes into an LCR to make fluoroantimonic acid, which we send straight into this blast furnace with Naquadah oxide mixture dust, which is our main product, or our main starting point. And that makes low quality Naquadah emulsion, which is over there, part of phase 2, still need to build that. And we also get titanium trifluoride. Now this titanium trifluoride gets combined with hydrogen, which is here, in another EBF, and this makes hot titanium ingots, which come out here, straight back into my mainnet. This also gives you back the hydrofluoric acid, which I said goes in a cleaner, smaller loop. And to deal with any like storage bus kind of shenanigans, I've just used a P2P hatch. So the hydrofluoric acid that comes out of this output hatch can only go here and nowhere else. So that way there's no mixing of these two hydrofluoric acid recycle loops. One other minor thing I've done differently, anything that I've marked as a blue or purple color on my flowchart get connected directly to the mainnet, because those are external inputs and products slash byproducts. So those don't need to be part of the Naquadah subnet. So I just do it straight from the mainnet. Okay, that's phase 1. Probably the most convoluted one of all of them, to be honest, at least until we get to neutron activators. The next step, low quality Naquadah emulsion into a centrifuge to get low quality Naquadah solution. Pretty straightforward. I just need to supply some sodium hydroxide, and I'll get some gallium hydroxide out, as well as the antimony, which I need to route back to phase 1. Gallium hydroxide is just reacted, or I guess centrifuged with sodium dust. Is that right? This might not be centrifuge. Whoops, my bad. This is supposed to be a chemical reactor. So, the gallium hydroxide is combined with sodium dust in a chemical reactor, and we get gallium dust and some sodium hydroxide dust. We get more than the amount we put in here, but these are chance outputs, so I can't rely on them. Hopefully this doesn't end up clogging my ME system. Anyway, I'll be back once phase 2 is done. Here it is, phase 2. Pretty small, pretty quick. We've got the centrifuge here, pulling in sodium hydroxide dust. I've decided to store it in a drawer here with overflow voiding. This way I don't have any chance of clogging up my main net. This combines with low quality Naquadah emulsion to make gallium hydroxide. which goes straight to this LCR to be processed into gallium using sodium dust. And it also makes antimony dust, which goes back into the beginning, and it makes the low quality Naquadah solution. That solution gets sent to an LCR at the start of phase 3, which I'll come back to, but let me grab this to finish the quest. Alright, phase 1 and phase 2 are done. Now on to phase 3. Here we combine our low quality Naquadah solution with P507, which is a solvent that I need to make. We'll come back to that. That gets turned into Naquadah adamantium solution, which is our endpoint for this phase. But we also get 16,000 fluorine-rich waste liquid. This can be combined with quicklime dust in an LCR to get fluorspar dust and waste liquid, both of which you can electrolyze or distill back into a bunch of different products. A lot of byproducts to send back to main storage, and also the fluorine for our partial recycle. The P507 is completely recycled, so I don't need to make more than this amount. I think it's used later on as well. Yeah, there's a little bit used over here as well. So I'm going to make some extra, which shouldn't be too bad. Now, P507 is made in a chem reactor with sodium, phosphoric acid, ethanol, which is fine, and 2-ethyl-1-hexanol. This I've never made before, and I don't think it has any other use, so there's no reason to craft a big batch of this. But this is just made using a copper plate, which is not consumed, so it's just a catalyst, and seed oil and hydrogen gas. Not bad at all. All done. Nothing special here. Things just being routed where they're supposed to, and that's about it. But now it gets interesting, because Naquadah adamantium solution is processed in a neutron activator. So I need to figure out how to set this thing up. I guess I can quickly go over the processing line here though. So the Naquadah adamantium solution goes into the neutron activator. This makes Naquadah rich solution. This, combined with more sodium hydroxide in an autoclave, gets you Naquadah dust, which you can blast, I think, to get Naquadah ingots, or to get the Naquadah doped silicon boules, wafers, whatever. And you get your P507 back. In addition to that, you get adamantine dust, which you can electrolyze for adamantium dust and some oxygen. And you also get Naquadah oxide mixture dust. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. That's right, it's the same dust that started the whole procedure. So you put in 64 at the very beginning, and at this point you get 32. So for every kind of iteration of this process, you get half of your Naquadah oxide mixture dust back. That is effectively the same as doubling everything and not getting this oxide mixture back. Because, you know, whatever, infinite sum, half, half, half. I'm not going to explain. But I am going to explain how the neutron activator works. I am proud to report I have figured out the neutron activator. It's actually quite simple. So here I have my neutron accelerator pointing into this transformer. So that's where it gets its power from. On the side here, I have a machine controller cover set to enable with redstone. This touches the neutron sensor, and the neutron sensor is set to inverted mode, and it's set to 215 mega electron volts, or 215 million electron volts. Because this recipe works between 200 and 230, so I just went for something in between, 215. And now what happens is this neutron sensor will emit a redstone signal if we are below 215 mega electron volts. That turns the neutron accelerator on, and that gives us neutron kinetic energy. Whenever there isn't a recipe running, the kinetic energy slowly goes down, but once it goes below 215 MeV, everything turns on again, and we go above 215 MeV, and then everything turns off. So it's just going to hover around 215. It's going to oscillate slightly, not more than 1 MeV, plus or minus, so pretty stable. So stable, in fact, that I've already processed my Naquadah rich solution. Now let me just set up the rest of this phase of Naquadah processing, and then I'll explain the rest of the chain. Okay, here we are. I already covered the neutron activator. One of the outputs here, the concentrated enriched Naquadah sludge dust, needs to be processed in another neutron activator, and that's the next phase. But the rest is processed in this electrolyzer, that being the adamantine dust, and the advanced autoclave, and that would be the Naquadah rich solution. From this autoclave, you get the Naquadah dust, and also your P507, which I am using a P2P to send back to where we originally used it. I'm using a P2P and not a fluid storage bus for a similar reason to the hydrofluoric acid back here. There's going to be another P507 loop later on, and I don't want them to mix. At this point, I have pretty much reached my goal, which was to get Naquadah, because the Naquadah can be turned into Naquadah ingots. I figured I may as well finish this off, just because why not? Starting here, at the concentrated enriched Naquadah sludge dust. This goes into a neutron activator that gets you low quality Naquadah sulfate dust. We also make sodium sulfate dust, which I'm going to electrolyze, and enriched Naquadah sulfate dust, which I'm also going to electrolyze. Here's the second neutron activator for processing concentrated enriched Naquadah sludge dust. From this, the sodium sulfate and enriched Naquadah sulfate dust get electrolyzed. You get liquid sodium out of this, which you could fluid solidify, but I don't care. I'm just sending it straight to storage. The main output here is the low quality Naquadah sulfate dust, which will be, for now, stored in this output bus until I do the next step. That next step being low quality Naquadah sulfate into an LCR with P507 and some water to get low quality Naquadah sulfate, and then you distill this to get Naquadah rich solution. And I've marked that as the endpoint, but I'm going to do the rest of this at once. So putting that through a neutron activator gets you some low quality Naquadah sulfate dust back. So there's another loop here. But you also get Naquadah sulfate dust. That's electrolyzed to get Naquadah dust. And before, at the DT, you also get some enriched Naquadah oxide mixture dust. That's not the same as what we started with. We started with Naquadah oxide mixture dust, but this is enriched Naquadah oxide mixture dust. I have a lot of this as well, and I do need to process it. But I think for today, I'm just going to do these two steps and then call it. And here are the last two steps. Here I have the P507 in this input hatch of this LCR, and it gets turned into low quality Naquadah sulfate, which goes into what's going to be a Dangote distillus, and it makes P507 again. And this just gets sent back. So again, I'm preventing any cross-contamination of my P507 lines. And finally, the Naquadah-rich solution goes into this final neutron activator, which makes some low-quality Naquadah sulfate, which goes all the way back to here, to this LCR, as well as some Naquadah sulfate dust, which gets electrolyzed. I just used the same electrolyzer from 2 steps ago because the outputs go straight to main storage, which is what I want. But cool. This is the whole, well, not the entire thing, but this is the majority of Naquadah processing, at least for now. Now, if you're after Naquadah itself, because remember we made Naquadah heen, it's actually better to get the dust from this chemical reactor recipe, and it's better to get the ingots from this blast furnace recipe, because look, it takes 2 seconds with Naquadah heen dust and carbon dust, compared to like 21 seconds for me with radon. Similar situation with the Naquadah doped monocrystalline silicon bulls. It's much faster and therefore cheaper energy-wise to use the Naquadah heen dust. Like look at this, using xenon, this is 25 seconds. But if you use an ingot, also using xenon, it's 375 seconds. Definitely keep your Naquadah in the form of Naquadah heen. If you need Naquadah, just react it or whatever. Thank you for watching this episode of the HamCorp Training Manual. In the next episode, we will continue massively expanding our existing infrastructure to be able to handle the demands of future progression. We will start with the construction of a data storage center for bulk storage of items and fluids using applied energistics. After that, we will take stock of fundamental resources that we are struggling to produce in sufficient quantities and find ways to generate them. This will likely take up the entire budget for the next training episode, but after that, we have plans of overhauling our entire chemicals building. But that's for the future. See you next time.